right, hello everyone. It's 6:02, so we figured we'd get started. Welcome to Self-Care as Resistance. We are the UCSD Cross-Cultural Center, and we're so glad that you're here attending our webinar. Before we get started with anything else, we wanted to make sure that we did a land acknowledgement, and this is a statement that's adapted from the UCSD Intertribal Resource Center. UC San Diego holds great respect for the land and original people of the area where our campus is located. The university was built on the unceded territory of the Kumeyaay Nation. Today, the Kumeyaay people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and cultural traditions as vital members of the San Diego community. We are honored to share this space with them, and we thank them for their stewardship.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leslie Santiago Ruiz. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm double majoring in public health and ethnic studies, and I'm one of the outreach and engagement interns here at the Cross Cultural Center, as well as a social justice educator.
And hello, my name is Risa Salino. I also use she, her pronouns. I am a political science and public law major, and I'm also an outreach and engagement intern at the Cross Cultural Center, as well as a social justice educator. So this is just a brief overview of what we'll be going over today. We're going to start with what is self-care and talk a little bit about the definition of self-care and what it can mean. Then we'll go into talking about burnout and how it affects, or how self-care affects burnout. Then we'll talk about the history of self-care, its roots, where it came from. After that, we'll go into a more specific discussion on self-care. So what it looks like now, what commercialized self-care is versus radical self-care. And then finally, we'll talk about practicing self-care, how you can practice it, give some examples, and those sorts of things. So before we gave y'all any information, we wanted to hear what you think. So what do you define as self-care? What is self-care? Have you heard of self-care before? All those sorts of questions. So feel free to pop your answers in the chat. Just make sure you set the chat to all panelists and attendees.
I can share a little about what I thought self-care was before doing the research for this. I initially thought self-care was like face masks, right? That's like the first thing that popped into my head, was like putting on a face mask or like laying down. But now I think self-care is really just like taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, and really giving yourself that downtime.
Someone in the chat said self-worth, self-valuable. I think that's a great definition of self-care, is valuing yourself and recognizing your self-worth. Someone else said taking care of yourself by doing things that help your mental health and physical health. Absolutely. Those are two super important parts of self-care for sure. Someone else said, I would say self-care is being sure to tend to yourself when you need it. So like taking a nap, exercising, sleep. Someone else said de-stressing, so like exercise, meditation, a meal, sleep. Taking care of yourself mentally and physically so you can be your best self. Absolutely. Keeping boundaries, that's a really big part of self-care. Giving yourself room to make mistakes, I love that. Definitely. Going in the sun, absolutely. The sun can be such a great way to take care of yourself and make sure you're feeling good. Well, thank you all for all your responses. If you have anything else you'd like to say, you're welcome to put it in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. So this is the definition of self-care that we found that we wanted to share with y'all. It's a pretty general definition, but it says that self-care is any set of practices that makes you feel nourished, whether that be physically, emotionally, spiritually, or all of the above. So that's a pretty all-encompassing definition. Self-care can look like a lot of different things, and we'll talk more about specifics on what self-care can look like later in the presentation. The opposite of self-care, which Leslie will talk about a little bit more in just a second, is burnout. And so we wanted to give a definition for burnout as well. It's a state of emotional and often physical exhaustion that causes an individual to feel unmotivated and hopeless. And this can be a definite result of not taking care of yourself and not engaging in true radical self-care.
And now I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between oppression and self-care. So oppression plays a really large role in our ability or inability to practice self-care. Unfortunately, systems of oppression such as capitalism and the patriarchy often don't allow for us to practice self-care. And this is because these systems are keeping us in constant labor. And this is typically experienced amongst BIPOC folks or Black Indigenous people of color. Typically, we're seen as disposable, and because of this, it's easy for people like employers to take advantage of us and keep us working. And this is especially true for folks who are of low income. And because they need the money, because they're willing to do all this for survival, they're willing to undergo this treatment and overwork themselves. I'm sorry. Not only that, but BIPOC folks are also constantly having to work in order to prove or validate the fact that they're not quote unquote lazy. Many, if not all, BIPOC folks have that lazy or unproductive label inherently tied to them already. And because of this, they may spend a lot of time working to prove that they're worth it or prove that they're worth being in the spaces that they're in. And this isn't just limited to jobs or career spaces. We also see this in schools, especially in universities. Students oftentimes may feel like they have to constantly be working or they have to constantly be studying to prove that they're good, to prove that they're a good student, or to prove that they're worth being at the university that they're at. I know that's something I dealt with a lot here at UCSD. I felt like I constantly had to be doing homework, constantly had to be studying because I saw other people studying. And this is especially true for many students of color who have faced economic and educational inequalities, mass incarceration, racialized policing, and the disparities from the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's because of these systemic inequalities that BIPOC folks are having to constantly work to compensate for disparities that result from these systemic inequalities. And in doing so, they have little to no time to spare for themselves to take care of themselves or do any self-care activities. And in addition to this, the normalization of the hustle and grind culture has made it very easy for folks to stay in constant labor. The hustle and grind culture glorifies working all the time and demonizes unproductiveness. And a lot of the time, self-care is treated as being unproductive because you're not working. And this negative relationship with work and self-care, it makes it very easy for one to neglect self-care. In addition to all this, the impacts of racism and discrimination have also contributed to the lack of self-care. And this can be seen in internalized forms of oppression where BIPOC folks may feel like they may start to believe what the oppressors start to say about them, and they start to internalize that racism and discrimination. And while doing so, they are constantly undermining themselves or invalidating themselves and their own feelings. And this can lead to the dismissal of their own feelings. And this contributes all to the tabooness that is around the discussions of mental health and wellness. And in addition to all of this, the inaccessibility of the widespread commercialized individualistic self-care that we see now makes it very difficult for folks, especially those who are low income, to access self-care resources. And we'll go more into this in the next few slides, but I did just want to mention this right here. And this is all to say that these oppressive systems are meant to keep us under constant labor. They're meant to keep us working, and they're meant to keep us down. Therefore, thriving and surviving in these systems is a radical act of resistance alone. Neglecting your self-care can lead to burnout, and burnout can come as a result of many things, many stressors, such as school, having to go to work, having to do school and work, having to deal with family situations, having to meet expectations or feeling like you need to meet those expectations, having to deal with finances, having to deal with the uncertainties that come from the COVID-19 pandemic, constantly being on survival mode. And I'll get into a little more about what this means in the next slide. Also having to adjust to remote learning, having to look at your screen all the time, sitting in an idle state, that can all contribute to one's experience of burnout. Burnout can feel like having a sense of failure or having a sense of self-doubt, feeling a sense of detachment, and having a sense of low motivation. And as I mentioned in the last slide, the glorification of the busy lifestyle has created an environment that normalizes being overworked. It glorifies always having something to do every minute of the day. And as I said earlier, I've experienced this at UCSD. Like I always feel like I had to be studying, or I always saw people around me studying. Someone would say like, I only got 6 hours of sleep the other day, and then someone else would follow up with, oh, I only got 5. Like this glorification of constantly being busy has contributed to people overworking themselves and feeling burnt out. Burnout is intersectional. And what this means is that burnout is experienced differently amongst different identities. So Black, Indigenous, people of color experience burnout differently than white folks. So while BIPOC folks are dealing with being overworked at their jobs or in school or having to deal with those family situations, they're also simultaneously having to deal with stereotypes such as the model minority myth. And if y'all aren't familiar with the model minority myth, this is a myth that essentially states that, or essentially perpetuates the narrative that Asian Americans are overachievers. And what this can do is that this sets expectations for many Asian Americans, and they may feel like they have to meet those expectations or constantly surpass those expectations. And because of that, they might constantly be working towards that. And again, that can all contributes to the feeling of burnout. Something else that is experienced amongst BIPOC folks is constantly being on survival mode. Survival mode results from our own traumas as well as intergenerational traumas. And we may constantly be on high alert because of our past experiences or because of our parents or grandparents' past experiences with systemic racism, violence, and brutality. And being on survival mode doesn't give us the time to reflect or heal from those experiences because we're always hypervigilant of the environment around us, and we perceive the environment around us to be a threat. And constantly perceiving that environment to be a threat can add another layer of stress. As I mentioned earlier, the stigmatization of mental health makes it very difficult to talk about these feelings, to talk about feeling tired, to talk about just your well-being in general. And that can add on to stress and not giving yourself the time to heal or even reflect on all that stress. It keeps piling up. And as I said earlier as well, the added stresses of racism, discrimination, and violence contribute to burnout, as well as the lack of resources, whether this be mental health resources or physical resources, because taking care of yourself and your well-being also means simply, as many of y'all stated, going outside, taking a walk, going out to see the sun. A lot of the time, many people don't have these resources to go outside physically. In addition, they don't have the space inside their own homes to maybe isolate themselves or reflect. So these lack of resources makes it very difficult for them to relax and to de-stress for a bit. And also I wanted to talk about how many BIPOC people constantly have to relive their traumas to legitimize their struggle. Unfortunately, a lot of the time our traumas and experiences aren't seen as valid or being real if we're not explaining it. So having to constantly re-explain these traumas and revalidate them to legitimize them adds another layer of stress and makes the burnout experience prominent within BIPOC populations. I also want to touch upon how burnout is experienced between gender. So women, especially BIPOC women, constantly are putting the needs of everyone else ahead of their own. And this is largely due to the patriarchal forces that run our society. And in doing so, they don't really take the time to take care of their own selves because they're constantly putting the needs of others in front of their own. Also, low-income folks have the added stressors of not having their basic needs met. And this can mean not knowing whether they're gonna have a roof over their head the next day or even the next week, not knowing if they're gonna be able to eat that day or have anything to eat the next day. So having this added layer of stress of not knowing whether their basic needs are gonna be met on top of, work or school or family, it all adds up and it adds to the experience of burnout. And again, this is all to say that self-care is a privilege. Unfortunately, living in a society where you're constantly marginalized and invalidated makes it very hard to love yourself, and it makes it very hard to validate yourself and allow yourself to take that time to take a break and sit back and reflect. And now I want to open up this space and ask you all, have you ever felt burnt out? And if so, when? And how did you feel? And again, remember to set the chat to all panelists and attendees.
I can go ahead and say something. I definitely remember feeling burnt out just last quarter. Actually, I was doing a bunch of things. I was really busy, involved in a lot of clubs and things. And so I just had a lot going on. And I ended up not prioritizing really important basic things like making sure I was getting enough to eat each day, that I was drinking enough water, that I was getting enough sleep. And not taking care of myself in that way, in addition to being so busy all the time, led me to feel pretty burnt out.
We're getting some responses in the chat. Someone says, near the end of a school quarter / semester, it always feels so difficult to focus and you're just exhausted. Yes, I definitely relate as well, especially around this time now, week 4, we're starting midterms and people are starting to get into studying and perhaps neglecting their self-care. Someone else says, yes, I felt exhausted when I was in my first year. I was working 30 hours a week and doing school full time. Felt like I never got a break. Right. Someone else says, I felt burnt out during finals week when having to work and study the whole week and deal with the stress of finals and grades. I felt overwhelmed. Yeah, feeling like you can't catch a break, definitely. Someone else says, I currently feel burnt out right now. I don't learn the best doing online school, and so I need to study much more to do well. And so I have definitely been neglecting other areas of my life. Definitely, there's something commonly experienced amongst remote learning. I know I have as well. All right, thank y'all for your responses. We're gonna move on. Feel free to drop the other responses in the chat though.
So, something that I wanted to discuss around self care is this myth of selfishness, because oftentimes we're told that taking time to relax or rest or take care of ourselves is something that's selfish, and that we should be doing things for other people all the time or not focusing on ourselves. And I just want to make it super clear that taking time for yourself isn't selfish at all. It's absolutely necessary. You're not going to be able to do the things that you want to do, be there for other people, if you're not taking care of yourself. I don't know if y'all have ever heard the thing that they say on airplanes where it's like, put your own oxygen mask on before assisting others. It's pretty cheesy, but the idea stands that you need to be able to attend to your own needs and focus on yourself before you can be there for other people. Additionally, self-care is super key in preventing burnout and making sure that you feel healthy and secure, that you're able to do the things that you want to do and continue living your life to the fullest. To do that, you have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Another thing that I also wanted to highlight is self-care in activism. In activist or social justice spaces, a lot of the times the sort of people who are involved in these things want to give a lot to the cause and want to put their full effort in and do as much as they can, which is fantastic, especially if you're passionate about what you're doing and you care a lot. But it's also important to remember that you still have to take care of yourself and you still have to make sure that you're meeting your own needs so that you can continue doing this super important work. There's this idea that I believe was coined in the 1970s by the Black Panther Party, this idea of the wellness activist, that in order to be an effective activist, you need to attend to your own needs. And this is super important and applies outside of activism as well. But I just wanted to focus on that in addition, because especially in social justice and activist spaces, it can become really easy to be burnt out when you see a lot of the harm that's being done and you're putting in a lot of effort, and sometimes it doesn't always reap the results or have the effect that you want it to have. So making sure to still take care of yourself as you're giving to other people as well. Additionally, here we'll go over a brief history of self-care, because the term has changed and gone through a couple different forms throughout the years before it's gotten to where we are today. So the term self-care was first coined in the 1950s in the medical community. And it was coined by a specific doctor. I don't remember his exact name, but the term was used for patients who were institutionalized. And what self-care consisted of was these simple acts like brushing your teeth, for example, to help self-worth. And so this is where self-care originated, but it's changed a lot throughout the years. So one of those changes was in the 1960s, where this term came to apply to first responders. People would use self-care as a way to address PTSD in first responders and help make that experience easier for them, specifically focusing on meeting your own physical, psychological, emotional, and spiritual needs, which I feel like are four really important categories to make sure that you're meeting in self-care. And so that's where this sort of began to develop and change into a little bit more of self-care that we understand today, or that we've seen in the 1970s. So the 1970s is when self-care became really popular and became much more of a community and widespread movement. And this was largely due to the Black Panther Party, also referred to as the BPP. There were especially a couple activists who we'll talk about later who were active in this self-care movement and making sure that, especially in activist spaces and especially in Black communities, self-care was being prioritized. One of the ways that they did this was through community healthcare. They were super key in setting up a bunch of different systems to provide community healthcare, because additionally, as I'll talk about later, self-care includes healthcare. It's about taking care of your physical self as well, and that's super important. And again, as I mentioned, self-care and activism was a really big point for them, making sure that these people who are giving so much of themselves to other people all the time also made sure to take time to take care of themselves. So two people that I wanted to highlight in the history of self-care were Erica Huggins and Audre Lorde. Erica Huggins was a part of the Black Panther movement, and she was super influential. She went through a lot of hardships in her life. She was a widow and single mother at 19, and also spent time incarcerated and in solitary confinement. And throughout these really difficult times, one of the things that she turned to and helped to get other people involved in was self-care. She advocated for self-care within the Black Panther Party and was a really huge part of being that push for self-care and activism. And as for herself personally, a lot of what she did was meditation and writing as self-care, which I think is great also to preach to other people and to suggest, because those are things that most people can do and most people have access to do. You don't need a lot of resources to be able to meditate or be able to write, and use that as a form of self-care. Audre Lorde was also an advocate for self-care. She believed that self-care is a radical act, and it's something that's super important. Self-care is absolutely necessary to surviving and thriving, especially in systems of oppression. And a lot of her focus was on just taking time to rest, taking time to take care of your physical and mental health, to focus on yourself and just relax and make sure that you're prioritizing what you need. So today, a lot of what we see is now commercialized self-care. We've moved away from that 1970s definition and understanding of self-care as a radical act, as self-care as community care, those sorts of things, and moved into a more commercialized, marketed version. So a lot of what we'll see today in self-care is things like bath bombs, face masks, massages, essential oils, like diffusers, all those sorts of things, a variety of products that you can buy to treat yourself. But most of these require spending money. And this is for a reason. A lot of corporations have taken to the self-care movement as a way to make money. They can capitalize off of this push for self-care, and they've done well because of it. The global health and wellness space is a $4.5 trillion industry. So a lot of money is made off of marketing self-care as something that can be commodified as little products that you buy and those sorts of things. However, this type of self-care is not accessible to everyone. Commercial self-care really caters to those who have privilege, who are in positions of power, like rich, white, cisgendered, and able-bodied people. Additionally, it assumes privileges that a lot of people don't have. It assumes that you have a bath where you can use a bath bomb. It assumes that you have the money to get a massage or the time to sit next to your essential oil diffuser for 30 minutes. When a lot of people don't have these options, they work a job, they don't have a bath, they don't have the money to spend on a massage. And so this type of commercialized self-care that's focused on the things that you buy has become a real issue and a real move away from this 1970s understanding of self-care. So instead, we defined a better version of self-care that is more true to its roots as radical self-care. And we talk about 3 different ways that you can engage in radical self-care. The first is just rest. So this is a super basic concept, but it's really important. Making sure that you take time to just relax, restore, maybe put on some music and sit by your window and sip a cup of tea for 15 minutes. You don't have to be doing anything. You don't have to be getting anything done. You don't have to be productive. You're just sitting there and you're resting. You're letting your body relax. This also includes sleep. Sleep is so important and makes so many functions in your body possible. So making sure that you get enough sleep every night and you're really taking time to rest and restore. Another part of this is wellness. So any things that make you feel really mentally and physically good. So that can be going for a run, walking outside, dancing around to music in your room. Maybe you really like baking, so you bake yourself a cake. Anything that just makes you smile, makes you feel happy and fulfills you. Those are things that you can do to help your wellness. And the final piece of this is community. I think that community is such an important aspect of self-care because it helps in healing, it helps in connecting with other people. Through connections, we're able to also care for ourselves and care for each other. And this is a really important part of self-care, especially when we think about the roots of self-care in the Black Panther Party. So why is self-care so important? We've talked some about this, but just to reiterate, self-care is absolutely crucial. It's healthcare. It's caring for your physical body and your mental well-being. It's absolutely necessary that you engage in self-care to keep yourself healthy. Additionally, when you can neglect self-care, that can lead to things like burnout, which can have a lot of not only mental negative effects, but physical negative effects. It's been linked to various health issues like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, depression, sleeplessness, and lack of appetite. You see these things that are going on in your head, manifesting in your body when you're not taking care of yourself properly. Additionally, practicing self-care is really important because it allows you to continue to do the things that you're really passionate about. When you take care of yourself, when you have time to rest and relax and restore, you can go and truly enjoy, learning in the class that you're really interested in, but maybe you're overworked and so you're too tired to get excited about the material you're learning. It allows you to be excited to go on a run and spend time outside. It allows you to continue to keep doing these things that you want to do while still feeling fulfilled and not exhausted. And in general, self-care can just help you feel and function better when you take some time out of your day to make sure that you're caring for yourself. So we wanted to ask another question, which is, have you ever neglected self-care? And if you have, what happened? How did you feel? I can share a bit of something. So this is a very small thing, but I'm someone who really gets a lot of joy out of eating good food, and especially fruits and veggies just make me feel good. And there was a period of time where I wasn't eating very many fruits and veggies. I was only eating like quick meals and like freezer stuff because I didn't have enough, I thought I didn't have enough time to get myself good food. And I noticed a lot of physical changes in my body. I wasn't feeling as good. I didn't have enough energy. And so when I started eating more fruits and veggies and eating just food that I really enjoyed, I felt a lot better. Some other things that people said are when they neglect self-care, they feel tired and apathetic. Absolutely, I agree. Someone else said, yes, I do it a lot. Like they're so stressed that they fall asleep without taking their contacts out. They leave the lights and TV on. Yeah, intense burnout, overwhelming feelings, difficult to enjoy things because you're constantly exhausted. I absolutely feel that one. Even if it's like things that you know you're excited for, if you've just been doing too many things, it's hard to get excited about those things. Someone else said they don't eat well or at all, and that makes them feel even worse. Absolutely. It's really important to make sure that you're fueling your body well and making sure that you're getting enough food in you. When I neglect self-care, I kind of go in a spiral of feeling more tired and stressed, but not doing anything that will make me feel better. Absolutely, I understand that. I think for me, what helps in those sorts of situations is trying to do one small thing that'll make me feel better. And then if that spirals into doing more things, fantastic. And if not, then I did one small thing that made me feel better. Someone else says a lot of homework and it feels unfulfilling, not drinking water, and they have a lot of work to do, feel more tired. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all your responses. We'll go ahead and move on, but I really appreciate all the participation. This is a quote that I wanted to share from Audre Lorde, who I mentioned earlier. I thought it just sums up what we've said so far in the presentation really well. She says, caring for myself is not self-indulgent, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And I could not agree more in reference to what Leslie was talking about, how surviving and thriving in oppressive systems is really so impressive, and making sure that you take care of yourself in these oppressive systems is absolutely necessary.
All right. Well, with all that being said, I want to play a short clip. It's about 2 minutes and 40 seconds. It's an interview with Alicia Garza on radical self-care, and she goes into a little more about what she thinks radical self-care is.
When Audre talked about self-care being an act of self-preservation, an act of political warfare, what she was saying ostensibly is that we weren't ever meant to survive. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about self-care is that self-care is for white people who are rich or wealthy, and that self-care has to involve buying something to make you feel better. So lots of times people will say things like, go get a massage, go to the spa, take a yoga class. And all of those things cost money. There's a huge misconception that if you can't afford to do that, right, that you also are not able to take care of yourself. And I really believe that it's one of the ways in which self-care as a framework, as a concept, and as a series of practices has been really bastardized. What I think self-care actually means is having and integrating a practice of putting yourself in front in a world that doesn't encourage us to be alive, to stay alive, to take care of ourselves, to feel okay about stepping back or stepping aside so that we can nourish ourselves to be in this world another day. When I first started doing this work 20 years ago, the way that I was taught about self-care was that it didn't have a place in movement work, that ostensibly, you were being distracted if you needed to take a day off or if you needed to do things to make sure that you were healthy. And those practices, I think, come from a period where people really did feel like not only were they under the gun, but they also felt like change was right around the corner. And I think, if anything, what I've learned from some of the people that have survived that era is that we have to be in it for the long haul. What I think is kind of getting in the way is this notion that you have to completely spend yourself dry to prove that you're down, to prove that you're a part of the movement, to prove that you can take it. And the reality is, given the state of our political conditions, given the state of what's happening in this country and around the world, we should be preparing ourselves for a long fight.
All right. As Alicia Garza said, self-care has a large place in activist and movement work. Self-care, unfortunately, has been normalized to be solely individualistic. It has been normalized to just be something selfish that you're doing for yourself, but in reality, it's not. It plays a really large role in the care of our communities. Radical self-care recognizes that the individual and the community have a reciprocal relationship. The well-being of us is also linked to the well-being of our own communities. So if someone in your community needs you and you're not taking care of yourself, how can you meet their needs? And vice versa, if they're not caring for themselves, how can they meet your needs? So creating an environment where we can be cared for and able to care for others is really important, and they're essential for the preservation of not only ourselves, but for the preservation and for the survival of our communities. I wanted to read this quote down here by Jamala Pitts, and I feel like it sums up pretty much what I was saying. And what Alicia Garza was saying is that if we are not preserving ourselves so that we can carry on in this work, then we cannot resist, we cannot liberate, we cannot educate for freedom, we cannot transgress, we cannot heal, and we cannot educate our students in ways that will lead to their own freedom and the freedom of others. And I wanted to play this other part of the interview where she talks a little bit more in depth about what community care is and how the care for ourselves aids in the care of our community.
I've been a part of this work for a long time, and I've seen many institutions, movements, organizations crumble because we haven't prioritized collective care and what it means to build radically new relationships with each other and with ourselves. If we study where we've come from, what we know is that the government has created programs to create chaos and discord inside of organizations that have the potential to really change the status quo. They created government programs called COINTELPRO, which were deliberately designed to infiltrate organizations and to play on their strongest weaknesses. So what's at stake if we don't do it? We'll have less institutions that we can offer for our communities that are healthy and whole. We will lose the ability to move our communities in a direction that is hopefully towards freedom, because our communities won't trust each other and we won't trust ourselves. And fundamentally, we'll lose the ability to not just build power, but to transform it. We don't want to replace one form of power with another form in which Black people or people of color are implementing and enacting the same toxic dynamics that the people who are in power now are enacting. We fundamentally have to be oriented and organized around transforming the ways that we be together, the ways in which resources are distributed in our communities, and the ways that we get to make decisions over our own well-being and the well-being of others. And that means that we have to be radical in our caring for each other, caring for our communities, and caring for the future that is right at our fingertips.
All right. And considering everything that we went over in this presentation, how do we practice self-care? Self-care does not mean the same thing to everybody. Self-care is different to everybody. You know, it can be different for me, it can be different for you. It really depends on what you need for your own well-being. And this can be remembering to eat a few times a day. You know, sometimes we're so worked up in school or work or other things that we have going on that we forget to eat. I know I have many times. This one can also include sleeping, remembering to go to sleep, or even remembering to take a nap, taking a break, taking a rest, maybe pursuing some of your hobbies or interests, or taking a walk out in nature if that's what you need for your well-being. And you can still purchase things for your self-care if that is what helps you care for yourself. So this is not to say that you can't purchase, those candles or those bath bombs. I mean, I know I need my candles to relax sometimes, but it's not the end all be all, right? So as long as we are looking after our needs and what we need to take care of our bodies and our minds, that is truly what self-care is. And I wanted to give you all a reminder in case no one has yet, a reminder that it's okay to spend a bit more time preparing what you're going to eat. And it's okay to not engage in school or work-related tasks on the weekends. It's okay to take a moment to breathe, and it's okay to take a break. It's okay to continue your work tomorrow, and you did the best that you could with the resources available to you. And I think this is just something that we all need to remind ourselves of when we can. I know it can be hard sometimes. I forget to remind myself sometimes, but I want to take this time to remind you all in case no one has told you this already. And now I want y'all to think about what needs you need. This is a time to reflect. I'm gonna drop a Jamboard link. If y'all can click that, and it's interactive. So on the left-hand side, there should be an option to press a sticky note, and you can go ahead and press that sticky note and write down what needs you need, and you can stick it on the appropriate place. But before that, I do want to go over what the body, mind, heart, and community needs are that I have put on the Jamboard. And this is an activity adapted from the Audre Lorde Project. Body needs are biological needs, physical needs. Mind is your emotional needs and needs that you need for your own thought processes. Heart needs are motivational needs, spiritual needs, and how you stay grounded. And community needs are needs from your social relationships, your interpersonal relationships, and community support. And we're actually gonna share screen to see how the Jamboard is going. Yeah, so take a few minutes to reflect on what those needs are. And feel free to post a sticky note anywhere on the screen.
Can I just say I love the ones that I'm already seeing? These are such great things. Making art, calling a friend. I need to call my friends more often who don't live near me. Body stuff like going outside in the sun, exercising, drinking enough water. That's another big one. Meditating. Love that. Absolutely. These are so fantastic. I see a couple that say reading. That's something I also need to do more often. I used to love to read, but now that I do it for school, I forget to read for fun. So that's absolutely a fantastic idea. Spending time with family, getting enough sleep, that's a big one. Absolutely. Turning phone off, that's something I need to do more too.
Eating a fruit or veggie at least once a day. Me too. I need to work on that as well. Cooking cultural dishes, so yum. Definitely, that's something I've been trying to do a little more this past quarter, because that's definitely something I neglected last quarter. Mutual aid, yes, mutual aid is so important in the well-being and the suspension of communities and individuals. Thank you all for your participation. This is beautiful.
Skincare routine, that's been a big one for me recently. I've been trying to keep up with my skincare routine to make sure I'm feeling good, neat things. Solidarity at work, love that. Absolutely. Organizing within my community, going to CAPS. We'll talk more later about other resources that we have available for you, both at UCSD and just in general around self-care, but CAPS is a great one for sure. Cleaning living spaces. That's another big one for me. I've noticed when my room is clean, I end up feeling a lot better. Listening to music, absolutely. Love all of this so much. Also, I'm just going to suggest before I click off of it, if you want to take a screenshot of this, you absolutely can. I think this is a great little collection of ideas for things that you can do to take care of yourself and feel good. So if you need some more ideas, feel free to take a screenshot of this or take a picture or whatever. I think this is a fantastic list that we've come up with together. And thank you all so much for all of your participation. Really appreciate it. Someone else said basic needs hub. That's a big one too. Yeah. Healing circles. Love this all. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and switch back to the slideshow now, but this was absolutely wonderful. And I really appreciate all your participation and all these fantastic ideas. These are things that I might never have thought of. So I super appreciate it. So we also wanted to, like I mentioned, talk a little bit about some self-care resources. These are only a couple. Obviously, there are lots of options for you, but these are some ones that we could think of that could be helpful, that are UCSD related or easy to access. So the first is the Shine app. This was created by two women of color to help practice self-care and make it more accessible to people. It's an app that you can get on your phone. I think you might be able to do it on a computer also. Some of it you have to pay for, but there are definitely some free options that I've done before that I've really loved. They have this like morning meditation, for example, that's like 7 minutes long where you stretch and you meditate, and it's fantastic. It takes almost no time and it's a great way to start your day. So they have some meditations and self-care courses as options for you there. I think that's a great app. And like I said, some of it's free. So that's awesome. Another option is Headspace. Through UCSD, Headspace Plus is unlocked. So there's some other features like more access to different modules and stuff. Headspace has a lot of different options. What they're known for most is meditation, but they also have things around sleep, fitness, movement, all those sorts of things. So lots of great self-care resources through the app Headspace as well. As someone mentioned on the Jamboard, CAPS is a fantastic place to go if you're looking for a little extra support. CAPS has counseling services. They also have workshops that they put on, different seminars, discussion groups, all those sorts of things that I didn't even know about until I looked into it more. So definitely check out their website. It has a bunch of fantastic resources. Additionally, they have other things that you can do on your own time if you're not feeling like interacting with people, if you're feeling like you want to keep it more private. Things like TAO, which is Therapy Assistance Online. They have different modules you can go through. So if you're feeling anxious, you can go through one of the little like courses that they have. Something else called Well Track, which is an app where you can track your moods so you can see different trends in how you've been feeling. So that's some of the things that CAPS offers, which is fantastic and a really great resource. The last thing I wanted to mention is the Zone, which is also at UCSD, and their main goal is to just support student wellness. So they have a bunch of different ways that they do that. Things like crafting workshops, yoga classes. They have the therapy fluffies, which are the dogs that they bring in. And all of these are super great opportunities for y'all to engage in some self-care at UCSD. And this is a list of the resources that we use today to create this presentation, as well as those links to those resources that I mentioned in the last slide. You can scan the QR code if you want to get those links. If you want to learn more about burnout or self-care or what this all can look like, feel free to take a look and do some more reading, some more research. It's all super interesting stuff, and I definitely learned a lot when I was making this presentation. And that is all we have for you. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We'd love to answer them. Additionally, we would love if you would check out our social media. We're on Instagram at UCSD Cross Cultural Center. You can find us on YouTube if you also search UCSD Cross Cultural Center. And on our YouTube, we have different recordings of previous programs and workshops that we've done. So if any of those sound interesting to you, you can check them out. This has also been recorded and will be posted there as well. Also, if you'd like to reach out to us, our email is cccenter@ucsd.edu, and we have our website as well, which is ccc.ucsd.edu. And all of these links are available with that QR code that's on the screen. You can scan it and it will go to all of our social media, email, website, all those sorts of things that you might need are all on that QR code.
Thank you all once again. I really appreciate all the participation. I love the space that we created. Thank you all for your thank yous in the chat. It's making me really happy. Hope you all have a great rest of your day and take the time to take care of yourself.
Definitely make sure to implement some of those things we talked about.